Okay, so we're in downtown Houston on Travis Street, and behind us, behind the construction, is the office building in which the Houston Endowment is located. And this is an important part of the story because these social impact markets that are being set up would not be possible without being propped up by philanthropy. If these were actually free markets or functioning markets, if we had some sense that a free market was going to solve social problems, there's no way that any of the solutions being advanced would happen without the support of large infusions of cash from private foundations. And we know many of these, Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, but there are a lot of others that are under the people's radar. And now Houston Endowment is a major force in Texas. It's one of the largest philanthropies in Texas. And I just want to touch a little bit. So the origins of it, it's quite old. It dates back to 1937. And the founders were Jesse and Mary Gibbs. So Jesse Gibbs came from Tennessee into Texas. His business was in lumber and then eventually in real estate development in Houston in the 19-teens and 20s. And so as part of his real estate development projects, he created the skyscraper that housed the Houston Chronicle newspaper. And so at the time, he took a 50% share in the newspaper for building the skyscraper in which the newspaper was located. He had tremendous assets such that when the Depression hit, he and local business leaders sort of organized to save the Texas banks from failure. So they figured out a way to keep the banks from going belly up. And then later, because of his influence, he was appointed by Herbert Hoover, the Herbert Hoover administration, to chair the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the RFC. And the RFC helped manage federal inputs during the Depression to help address some of the many social problems, but then it pivoted during the Second World War towards industrialization in support of the war effort, largely in defense contracting, which we know that Texas is also a major defense contractor. And after that time, he was later appointed Secretary of Commerce. So he was quite influential, not just here in Texas, but on a national stage in real estate and finance. So the current asset holdings for the endowment are $1.8 billion. Much of their giving is focused in Texas, though not exclusively. Now, their giving areas are things that most people would consider wonderful. Things like housing, like early childhood education, public education, higher education, supportive housing. But the challenge is what's moving forward are the way in which these social needs are being melded into social impact markets in human capital finance, where vulnerable populations' behaviors are baked into all of the analytics for global financial speculation. And I'm actually facing two buildings. At this intersection, the endowment is on one corner. Opposite me is the JP Morgan Chase building. Opposite that is the Bank of America building. And on the third corner is a building occupied by BNY Mellon. So we can see the interfacing of the global finance interest into the well-being of communities, even to the point of things like parks. The Houston Endowment is investing in healthy parks initiatives, but the healthy aspect is going to be weighed against health performance outcomes tied to wearable technologies. So we may end up having beautiful parks that are financed through predatory philanthropy and global financial investments, but the payoff of that will be that we have to yield up our data to show that our physical health or our mental health is improved by using the parks. And that's not the kind of world I think any of us want to live in. I was looking at their news page on the way over here about recent projects. One of them involved $1 million being given to the Houston Independent School District for strategic planning around outcomes. Now, those outcomes are all going to be data-driven because that's how these markets are set up. And increasingly, the outcomes are not simply going to be around academic performance, but around soft skills and mental health, and even within the context of community schools about outcomes of families in relationship to things like housing insecurity and food insecurity. So these vulnerable populations are caught up in this web. Now Houston, when I was doing my early education work around educational technology, it is a future-ready school district. It's a district that has embraced technology, and again, it is framed as advancing digital equity. All of the Houston Endowment's language is around social justice and equity. But my question continues to be, what is equity if one's life is limited to data metrics that are put on a dashboard and then engineered by state intelligence and finance actors? I don't think that that's actually equity. I'll touch again, a few years ago, the Houston Endowment was part of out-of-school time learning, which is that Pokemon Go kind of education. Again, the education you're getting is going to be less and less in your brick and mortar school. That's going to be your drop-in center to meet with your case manager about your career pathway. And then the learning, quote unquote, that happens is going to be in community-based partner settings tied to data analytics from wearable and device-based technologies. The endowment has also been looking into childcare, and as we know, that this early matters education interfaces with the Heckman equation and early childhood outcomes for those social impact bonds for pre-K. And again, ultimately it's all going to be running on the blockchain identity systems. So that's about it for Houston Endowment, but I just want to re-emphasize the importance of this whole makeover of digital life in the metaverse under social impact is happening through the intersection of outcomes-based contracting of government services with private market investors that are all seeded through these endowments and philanthropies like the Houston Endowment.